Good morning and good afternoon, and welcome to our webinar, Getting Started with Apache NiFi Across Industries with our partner Tunity. My name is Kate Disney-Lagers. I'm your webinar producer. And before I go ahead and turn it over to our presenters, I just want to go over a few housekeeping things. We were going to be doing a Q&A section at the end of this webinar, but please feel free to ask any questions throughout the webinar. We have a Q&A box for you on the left-hand side of your console, and that's where you can go ahead and just ask your questions at any point. We have a couple resources for you to download. On the right-hand side of your console under Resources, we have the slides available for download as a PDF, as well as a couple links, including the Apache NiFi for Dummies book. And we do encourage you to check those links out as well. And again, we'll be doing the Q&A section about the last 15 minutes of the webinar. But questions are appreciated at any point during the webinar, and they will be addressed as time is allowed. You will be receiving a copy of this webinar on demand roughly by a couple hours after finish the webinar. So you can come back and view it again if you need to. We also do have a social media buttons down there, so please feel free to share this webinar with anyone who would have value in it, any friends and colleagues who would really appreciate the Apache NiFi. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our speakers, Cindy Maike and Dan Potter.
Kate, thank you very much. So I'm Cindy Maike, and I lead the Industry Solutions team at Hortonworks, and I also have responsibility for the insurance and healthcare industry, and look forward to talking about our topic here today. And Dan, if you just do a quick introduction, and then we'll get started.
Thanks, Cindy. This is Dan Potter, and VP of Product Management and Marketing at Tunity. We're a longstanding Hortonworks partner, and I'm excited to share with you some of the new developments and how it applies to different industry-specific use cases.
Great, Dan. Thanks so much. And for those on the phone, today we want to kind of talk about what we're seeing from a change in the connected world and some of the digital new data sources and how you can leverage that within Apache NiFi and then also with Tunity. Also discuss some of the top industry use cases, and we'll give highlights across multiple different industries. We'll also go into a little bit more about the Tunity Replicate and integration within the Apache NiFi component, and then also leave it open for Q&A, as Kate had indicated. So I think as we look at what's going on in the world, data is really at kind of driving our everyday lives and also just our business activities. So whether it's information that's coming from mobile and digital apps or from an online shopping capability to medical records and to different types of information coming from medical devices, whether it's wearables, looking at streaming music, from a day-to-day individual perspective. But I think what's really interesting is if we take this and move also into kind of the industrial component and where we are from kind of an industrial or Industry 4.0 is, we've moved from, just our traditional procedural-based processing where we've had information from the enterprise, interacting with customers to product integration to the supply chain, but now really a concept of, what's evolving from industry business models and industry connectivity, where we'll actually see the aspect of connected communities and industries working together with the exchange of information, the information and data. So whether or not it's, sharing of data from a supply chain perspective to, you look at the autonomous vehicle and the connected vehicle and the data that's being shared there from the telecommunication industries to the insurance industry to financial services. So what do we mean really by, where's the business value? Is we're seeing industries more and more coming together to look at the monetization of data, being able to share real-time operational models, whether that's in, commerce and trade or it's the exchange of, supply chain data. And what that's really helping us do is, develop new revenue streams, both from customer profile, from location information, making sure products and services are available across industries, and we'll share some of those examples. The other aspect is, using data differently to help us with, predictive and preventive maintenance activities, looking at, context-aware e-commerce type situations, and then also the impact of the financial benefits, both from operational cost savings of sharing of real-time data for supply chain efficiencies, to ensuring that we don't have stockouts on retail shelves or with online shopping. So especially this time of year with we're so close to the holidays. But I think as we start to look at those elements, there's some new requirements that we actually see. So to actually create those aspects of the connected community, we have to think about our business models in the context of what does it mean to truly have, real-time visibility across your supply chain, from, the shop floor to the shipping or to packaging to shipping to distribution to the stores or to the end customer. And then also, how do we tie back, what's the impact of on product performance? So looking at kind of the golden batch, can I actually, optimize the yield within certain types of product development activities? To also, what does it mean from a customer perspective? Having real-time visibility, can that also give us better insights? Are customers' needs being met? Are we satisfying them with the right products and services as they want to be served? But then the other aspect is this actually requires us to have a higher velocity and being able to, make adjustments to our business processes, and not something that, let's take this information and we'll react to it, in the next version of the predictive model. But it's how do we actually leverage this real-time data to help us influence those models that we have to the aspects of a model as a service to actually allow for certain types of preventive type activities. So as we look at, from a Hortonworks and Attunity perspective, as an organization that's really, founded on data and enabling, a global data management, there's multiple components within the Hortonworks and the open source platform. Those capabilities, when we talk about Apache NiFi, that's really down within our data flow component, and that can be, landing of data from, data at the edge to also data inside of the organization, and also, feeding that data into, HDP. So looking at your data, whether it's, on-prem, if it's in the cloud. But then there's also the aspect of looking at the extensible type services. So from a data plane perspective, what are we doing from a cloud? Because as we see data and the new types of data sets, organizations want the option. So being able to have data on-prem in the cloud, just depending on where it makes the most sense from a business perspective and also from an IT optimization perspective. And Dan, if there's something, kind of like explain to those on the call kind of how Attunity fits into the connected data platform.
Yeah, Cindy, what we've seen is that as these organizations are moving toward this digital transformation, it's requiring a fresh look at the underlying platforms and data architectures to support it. And what's so exciting about Hortonworks is, having both the data in motion and the data at rest sides, both from HDF and HTTP, allows organizations to really do both in a Lambda-style architecture, having real-time when it makes sense, having historic data, and blending it together. So as a Hortonworks partner, we plug in nicely at both levels, real-time, enabling real-time data, which we'll talk a lot about, also ingesting data into HDP, and doing it fully integrated into data plane. So as organizations are looking to move to this next generation data architecture, they really have a complete end-to-end solution with Hortonworks and Attunity. So on the next slide, I'll talk, you can talk a little bit more about what this means from supply chain, then I'll dive a little bit more into the technology to support it.
Fantastic. So, some of the things as Dan and I will go ahead and build this out, what we see is, from a predictive and a preventive model perspective is, organizations really needing to ingest data from either our transactional systems, whether it's, SAP or if it's Oracle, in the insurance industry, it might be things like Guidewire, or, some of the other, healthcare systems, whether it's data from Epic, and being able to actually then also blend that information, and if we look at it in the context of supply chain, is how do I also ingest data that might be social data, maybe it's geolocation information, it might be data that's coming from point of sale, it might be coming from web applications, or it could be data coming from sensors. And the need to actually be able to store that data and then fundamentally be able to process the information and be able to identify and analyze that information. And then how do I leverage that data that might be evolving and might be changing? And as we talk about model as a service type capabilities, is how do I also blend that real-time information with some of my more traditional or historical type information, and then be able to update those models in real time, and from that, also be able to effectively, monitor transactions, be able to monitor, the systems, the data flows, and so forth. But I think the most important thing here is from a supply chain perspective is also how can I make real-time decisions based upon that type of transaction, both the historical as well as the real-time. And Dan, if you want to help us put that in context of, within the platform capabilities.
Yeah, so where Tunity fits in here is, when you think about making real-time decisions and taking real-time action, you naturally start thinking about IoT and real-time operational data streaming in. And operational data obviously is very important. But the missing link here to make a good business decision is those core transactional systems that provide a lot of the business context. So, we'll talk about some stories where having this blend of IoT and operational-oriented data together with those core transactional data, that allows you to blend both styles of information to make the right kinds of decision. Because just having the operational data alone may not be enough, and in most cases is not enough context to make those right decisions. So being able to take those enterprise transactional systems that you don't think of as real-time streaming and to make them real-time streaming systems. And I'll talk about how Attunity unlocks the value of those transactional systems, because it's one of the core things as you start to move to a connected world. How do you take all of those core systems that you have? Some of it is natively streaming, like the OT and IoT data, but those core transactional systems, how do I unlock the data in systems like a mainframe or a relational database like Oracle or SQL Server, in core ERP systems like SAP? There's an awful lot of business logic and business value in these core systems. What we do is we unlock and we stream that data as it changes. We do that based on the transaction logs of those systems, and we do it in a way that does not require any agents or does not impair or get in the way of those core production systems. So you may have a 20-year-old mainframe application that's driving a big part of your insurance business, and we see that a lot. To be able to put a streaming interface in front of that, and as changes to policy information or customers change, how do I stream that into a modern platform like Hortonworks? So Attunity is all about first unlocking that data and streaming those changes in real time, moving them directly into NiFi or moving them directly into HTTP or both. So it's both stream optimized to deliver to real-time infrastructure like NiFi, and it's Hive optimized to be able to take the data. Once it lands in HTTP, then you kind of move it to the next step, which is, all right, I now have it on the HTTP platform, but how do I make it analytics ready? And this is something that Hortonworks and Attunity have worked very closely together to be able to optimize not only the delivery of data, but to be able to make sure that it's transactional in nature and ACID compliance. So as we move it into HTTP, you can be assured that the data that you're seeing in HTTP accurately reflects the current state of those source systems, and that both the data and metadata is being moved in real time. so that if the source systems change, that change automatically gets propagated into Hortonworks. So all of the continuous updates and all of the structuring of this data to make it analytics ready, it's a fully automated process. And that becomes really important. So when we start talking about the use cases where there's both real-time streaming data, there's historic data, and the need to blend these two together and to make them analytics ready, the more and more that you can automate that process, the more value that you can get, and the faster you can make better, more informed decisions. So now let's dive into some of the use cases. Cindy, you want to give this the context?
Sure. So, in the insurance industry, I think we're seeing, just a change and an evolution, kind of a reinvention of what's happening in the insurance industry. So, and I think this also goes back into just, as an industry, insuring other industries as well as individuals. But the nature of the risk is changing. So we see organizations in the insurance industry as well as in the reinsurance industry, how do we better manage and understand the risk? So if we have, smart cities and smart buildings, we have individuals, whether it's connected, lives or connected health, connected medicine, also the changing of, sharing economy and how maybe our traditional, just so you take for instance the Ubers, the Lyfts, the Airbnb, those types of transactions where our risks are now being used in different ways. To the aspect of looking at and ensuring smart factories. So you've got factories that are connected with different types of edge devices. How do I stay abreast of that? And I think one of the most prevalent things that we've also seen, especially in the auto insurance area, is whether it's telematics or it's the connected car, getting information from those vehicles, or partnering with the automotive industry on data collection and looking at both driving behavior, but with the goal of actually making for safer roads and safe and saving lives. To the other aspects of looking at whether it's certain types of IoTs. Or robotics-based processes. And then the other last element is also the change in, the new offerings around cyber risk. So some very different things from an industry perspective, and from an industry that's historically said we don't really need to be real time. Things around us are real time. So as a result, really the reinvention of the industry to be more real time. So what's also driving that is if we stop and think about some of the data sources that we're seeing, and it really kind of spans the value chain or the process areas from, whether it's, risk and underwriting analysis to, usage-based, products where we're seeing, the driving data. We may also see, digital photos of how I interact at the time of, doing a loss analysis for a client, to looking at claims notes and diary. So where does that information get stored? And if you really think about some of the data in motion type capabilities, is the usage of drones in the industry or satellite imagery, and how's the industry actually looking at both individual-based transactions as they look at catastrophic events. Being able to leverage real-time data regarding, seismic, how do I monitor, the earthquake information across the globe, to looking at biometrics data, especially in the health insurance industry, to leverage and understand that, and just all other aspects of customer onboarding data. So that the nature of the data is changing, the speed of the data is changing, and the complexity of the data is changing. And on that, Dan, I'll just maybe kind of start it off and let you kind of weave into this as well. Some of the top use cases that I see, and it spans both the property casualty, it spans the life insurance industry, the reinsurance. It's where we see, data coming in from, vehicles. We see the weather. We see, photos. But I think, there's some areas where, this is an industry where we still have a lot of mainframe usage. And I know we've worked together on multiple insurance customers. If you want to kind of maybe share some of those stories, that'd be great.
Yeah, so what's interesting is you're absolutely right. There are a lot of mainframes still in insurance and financial services and in many industries. But insurance is, over the last few years, we've seen some real innovation being driven. Even though some of those core back-end transactional systems may be 20 plus years old, the ability to unlock that in real time is driving some real innovation. Customer 360 is big. We've got lots of joint customers who are looking to take real-time information from a variety of different sources for things like, next best offer for customers, or real-time underwriting and quoting based on information from a variety of disparate systems. So that's one we see consistently in insurance. You talked about kind of the real-time catastrophic event. That's a great example of blending, outside information, more sensor, real-time, news-oriented information together with the traditional transactional information. So you can understand, an insurance organization can understand what their exposure is by blending both that outside information along with their internal information. So that kind of real-time analytics around exposure is becoming very important. The third area I would say is real-time fraud detection around claims. So again, blending information as it's coming in from outside sources together with transactional systems. These are the kinds of innovation that's being driven in an industry that you historically haven't thought of as being real drivers and innovators, but that's really changed over the last few years.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think the other aspect is, as we look at the moving on to kind of the manufacturing industry, quite a few different use cases and opportunity with, a huge focus on, apologies here, huge focus on, preventive maintenance, doing supply chain optimization. So lots of, transactional, the ERP systems, usage of, whether it's, things like SAP or JD Edwards, pulling in, also things from, the machine data. So whether it's real-time sensors that are on certain activities, also looking at, the work order. So how do I actually blend that type of data to say, am I going to have downtime? If I have downtimes, how is that going to impact the downstream information? Also being able to look at, before we were talking about the preventive models, being able to understand potential defect testing, leveraging, data that's coming off of the assembly lines, looking at that from a process flow and control perspective, whether it's, how does that then feed into, potential, product redesign or new design in case there's a recall, and actually, with the goal of actually having a recall avoidance. So lots of different types of data sources that are there and being able to blend together with the historical. But I think if we focus maybe a little bit on the, just the connected car and quite a few activities, and before when we were talking about the connected communities across industries, this is where we're seeing, a real uptake in new business models to the point of, collecting information from the vehicle, sharing that information. How does the telecom industry become involved in that? So some of this data can actually, help you from a prediction perspective on both the design of the car to looking at, preventive maintenance to, insurance premiums. And now you actually see, certain organizations that, when they sell a vehicle, they're actually selling a subscription to the vehicle, which comes fully included with your insurance premium, with your maintenance included with that to the cost of the vehicle. So lots of moving parts, or not parts, but, a plethora of data and information that needs to be shared, and then also being able to connect certain type of data from the infotainment system. How does that impact pricing models? To route optimization, so you've got the integration of insurance companies to regulators, to the telecom companies, to infotainment providers, to software companies, and the auto manufacturers. So I think it's just kind of as we look at the connected communities and ecosystems, I think that the car is probably one of the best examples of information sharing across industries. And on that, Dan, I'll let you take this one.
I agree with. I agree with that, Cindy. I think it's really exciting, and we happen to have a joint customer at Tunity and Hortonworks that is doing just this on a very large scale. So to give you a sense on the scale from a transactional system, so there's IoT, connected car information coming into a very large data lake. But just the transactional systems that they're integrating, these are things like warranty and assembly line information. These are ERP systems, the data historian systems on the shop floor. These systems, there's over 500 distinct databases that are being fed today, transactional systems that are being fed into the data lake. 1 billion changes per day are being processed through this. So if you think about it from a change data capture, I'm capturing these changes that are happening in these transactional systems, and I'm processing these through my new data platform with Hortonworks. Over 1 billion changes per day. It's being managed by 12 different data centers around the globe. The scale of this it's very, very large, and they're about halfway through their journey in unlocking over 1,000 transactional systems. And again, blending that all together with the connected car IoT information, the results that we're seeing so far, it's exactly as you would intend a system like this to be in terms of preventative maintenance and having that end-to-end view to have early warning systems to understand if parts are indicating earlier failure than predicted. What is the ramification that has throughout every aspect? From supply to design and manufacture to warranty exposure. It's a wonderful example of how when you bring all of these information systems together and start to apply more modern analytics, you can have significant business outcomes, and we're starting to see that now. So I love this as an example.
Yeah, and I was actually with the insurance company CMO just earlier this week, and talking about, she also previously had worked in the automotive industry, and just the collaboration that's going on there for if you've got, say, a product recall on tires on a car, and the impact from a product liability issue, the impact to both, the car manufacturer, to the tire manufacturer, to the interlock with, who's insuring that both of those organizations as well as the individual. So lots of opportunities and collaboration going on in the industry with the data. So let's move on to the energy and utility industry. So we're seeing, again, like a lot of industries is, the new data sources and also some of our traditional. But again, you see the common theme here of doing predictive, being able to do the preventive, which really requires both your transactional, your historical information, your more real-time capabilities around model as a service capabilities. And in the utilities and the energy, also being able to look at, where information where energy is being consumed, looking at the smart grid, bringing into consideration weather and environment usage, being able to look at service vehicles for certain types of outages, and then also the impact back to, customers, how do they feel about services, and then also what the impact to, pricing and service delivery. So there's some interesting things going on in this particular area too. And Dan, if you want to kind of talk a little bit about the use cases, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll give you one that's kind of a good example of again blending the IoT sensor information with more traditional transactional information. In the energy sector, if you're an energy generator, these big gas turbines are very expensive pieces of equipment. They happen to be big dust magnets, and the blades over time collect dust and they start to wobble. And when it reaches a certain threshold level, the warning lights will indicate, it's time to do some preventative maintenance. Because bringing down these systems are very expensive, or heaven forbid if they break, it's a very, very expensive proposition. So, looking at the sensor data to be able to predict and to do the preventative maintenance, that's really helpful. But you also need the business context, and this is where the faster, smarter decisions are being made. If I can understand that, at some point in the very near future, I'm going to need to bring down this gas turbine to do some cleaning and some preventative maintenance, I want to make that decision in a business context. And the business context would be, having real-time views of demand and contracts and pricing, and what is the cost and what kinds of maintenance operations are available within the vicinity. Bringing that all together helps you make that right decision. Because without that transactional information, without the business context, you might say, when the machine starts to hit that tolerance and the warning light goes on, independent of that, you might take it down and clean it. And that may seem like the right thing to do, but the business cost could be very, very high. So again, blending that OT data together with the IT and transactional data, this is the real value. In the world of energy and utilities, you see a lot of SAP. And SAP systems, they're mission critical. This is where a lot of the business context comes from, but they're very difficult systems to unlock and to stream changes. And this is an area where Attunity provides unique value. We can move all of those changes and route those changes into HDF and HTTP in real time, so you can start to do these more innovative kinds of real-time analytics.
Fantastic. So the other aspect is, I think if we look at financial services, quite a few areas of use cases that we see, whether it's from a transactional systems, we've got quite a bit of customer data, or trading data as it comes to the capital markets industry, to being able to look for OFAC checking, being able to pull in ATM streams, looking at credit card fraud, looking at transactional data as it comes to wires and transfers, blending that also with credit information, to looking at web logs, to also looking at logs for certain types of transactional information pertaining to cyber threats, and really kind of looking across both the customer interaction, risk data aggregation, looking at AML to fraud detection and trade surveillance. So different areas very similar to the insurance industry and the different types of information and data, and also a lot of mainframe type items. So Dan, if there's anything you want to add, from a financial services use case.
I'll give you a great example of, again, a joint customer of ours that is one of the largest payment processing providers in the world. In fact, they handle all of the payment processing for Apple Pay. One of the things when you're dealing with systems like an Apple Pay, they're not large transactions. There's a lot of transactions, and those decisions need to be made very quickly in terms of do we approve the credit card transaction or not. This real-time decisioning and this real-time credit risk assessment, they've taken a different approach, and they've started to build their own credit risk models, and they're refining and retuning those models in real time using machine learning. So every time a credit card transaction goes through, as they process this, they make the decision in real time, and they're updating and refining their models in real time. So what they've seen, they've been able to significantly reduce the cost of having a third party provide that the credit risk assessment for them. They're now doing it in-house, so there's significant savings there. But as their machine learning models are being tuned and refined over time, they're getting faster and faster and reducing their risk exposure. So again, this notion of bringing real-time financial services information to make real-time and automated decisioning in this case, great example of how important it is to use real-time information to strategic advantage.
Fantastic. So on that, Dan, I'll pass it to you to really kind of talk about, the usage of Attunity and from a real-time streaming data perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Cindy. I thought I'd take just a minute here to talk about some of the needs and challenges as organizations are moving more toward real-time. Some considerations. Obviously, latency. As you move to real-time, your intent is to reduce that latency. So it's about capturing changes as quickly as possible, moving the data where and when it's needed. It's doing it at the right scale. As we shared some of the examples, the auto manufacturer in processing over 1 billion changes per day, these are very big systems, and they tend to grow very, very quickly because, as organizations start to move to these style of analytics and architectures, they're seeing great value. So they scale very quickly. They need the flexibility to be able to take advantage of new technologies. The great example is the machine learning algorithms and different platforms, so like TensorFlow. People want to be able to take advantage of the latest and greatest and not be locked in. So having that flexibility becomes very important. The time to value is all about automation. We've seen a lot of kind of first generation efforts around transformation die on the vine because of, they didn't have enough developers who understood these new technologies and didn't have the skills. So the premium now is on how do I automate this and how do I reduce the dependency on developers? How do I build a high-performance system without impacting those core transactional systems that our business relies upon? And how do I make this as efficient as possible and move to a real-time world? So one of the things that we've done to try to overcome these challenges and really take advantage of it is automating a data pipeline. So it's all about capturing those changes from those transactional systems, landing that data either directly into HDF or into HDP, automatically structuring the data and provisioning that data into analytics-ready data sets that can then be consumed and analyzed by business users. So this notion of having data pipelines, of automating that end-to-end process, of being able to take IT data and OT data and bringing that together into analytics-ready data sets, this is where the value comes from. And sometimes this gets overlooked, just how difficult it can be without modern tools to automate it. Because every step, it's a multi-step process to do this right. Landing the data, structuring it, provisioning it, modeling the data. These are different skill sets. They tend to be development tools that are new and complex, and people don't always have the skills. So the goal should be to automate this end-to-end process so you can get to the analytic-ready data and spend all your time building innovative new applications versus spending time capturing and preparing that data. And to that end, kind of to help, we've developed a series of blueprints that help organizations understand how to move to support these different use cases, to support the different technologies, kind of across a wide variety of different use cases. We touched upon many of them today. There's a lot more interesting and innovative things that people are doing across the spectrum of industries and across the spectrum of different types of applications, new applications, microservices-based applications, new analytics. So there's really a whole wealth and diversity of different applications and use cases. Again, finding a way and having a strategy where you can build out on a modern platform with a data architecture that will support an evolving set of use cases is absolutely critical. And if you can automate that end-to-end processing and make that data available in real time, that's when you're going to see the value. So Cindy, with that, I think we should move into Q&A.
Yes, and so for those of you, I know we've had several questions come in, but if you've got additional questions, please use the Q&A feature to enter your question. And Dan, the first question I have here is, how do you manage, and we can address this one together, but I'll let you answer first. How do you manage data capture from different sources, storage, access, and integration of complex data sets such as weather, images, operational, in both cloud and on-prem from different groups in an organization using the Attunity and Hortonworks products?
Yeah, okay, great question. This is where NiFi fits really well. So what NiFi does is allows you to build these pipelines for real-time data feeds. And IoT data, sensor data, a lot of those are naturally and inherently streaming data sets. So that's where the Hortonworks NiFi product can ingest those sources directly. How Attunity augments is that we unlock and we stream enable those core transactional systems, SAP systems, applications on relational databases, data warehouses, mainframe systems. So we also feed directly into NiFi in real time. So you can build out a complete pipeline through NiFi. You can also feed that information from NiFi directly into HTTP, or with Tunity directly into HTTP from the stream enablement that we do. So you have a lot of flexibility to be able to build either real-time analytics or real-time applications directly from NiFi, or blend historic and real-time information using HDF and HTTP.
Great. And again, I'll just, I think you've brought in that, there's the NiFi components that, are within the HDF. And HDF also brings in some of the Storm and Kafka components as well to add to some of the, the payload handling and the data lineage and data provenance as well. Another area here was, how do you manage and handle the inherent network latency barriers for real-time data streaming and replication?
So we're obviously constrained by the network in which you're connected to, but one of the reasons why the Tunity approach to data integration fits so nicely in this real-time world is that we process data as it changes. So the data that's going across the network it's only the changed data. So the data tends to be smaller in size and more frequent, as opposed to bulk data movement. So traditional data integration technology is done in bulk movement. It's large batches of information that are typically being moved on a nightly basis or sometimes every couple of hours. And then it becomes a bottleneck, and then it becomes, that's where the latency is introduced. From an Tunity perspective, we're efficiently moving it across the network as it changes. We're compressing it, we're securing it as it goes across the network. So it's about as fast as you can get based on the size of your pipe.
Right, and then there's also features and functions within NiFi as well that's helping manage. So say, for instance, if you lost a communication, being able to understand, where a transaction is as it's moving from a real-time perspective, so able to keep track of any glitches in the network as well. Next one, this one, gosh, you're getting a lot of questions here. Is the metadata captured in Tunity shared within Atlas?
Thank you. I meant to bring this up when I talked about, how we're integrated with Data Plane. Really, Atlas is the primary point of integration. So, if you think about Tunity's role in unlocking data from those transactional systems, in modifying that data, in structuring that data in Hive, in transforming that data, and we use Spark and HTTP as transformation engines. At every step of that process, there's metadata collected. All of that metadata is shared directly and synchronized directly with Atlas. So Attunity is, we recognize our position as one of the important collectors of metadata in a system. So we ensure that everything that we collect is shared directly with Atlas. Just like the other parts of a system should all be publishing into Atlas, and Atlas becomes your single source of truth.
Fantastic. And this one might be coming from somebody in the insurance industry. Do you support change for capture from IMS?
IMS is one of those classic mainframe systems. So the answer is yes, we support IMS. We support vSAM on the mainframe, DB2Z, DB2I. We've got comprehensive support on mainframe. And in the way in which we do mainframe, it's very different from others. One of the key things on a mainframe is you want to minimize the amount of processing that's done on the mainframe because it's very expensive. So we take an agentless approach to the mainframe. We pull data from the mainframe once and cache that information. So if you wanted to take data as it changes from the mainframe and propagate it to, say, 3 different systems, one may be NiFi, one may be HTTP, and one may be an enterprise data warehouse. We collect that data once, cache that data, and then you can cast it across the different systems. So it's a very efficient way of pulling information from the mainframe, again, to minimize the costs of processing.
Okay. And this next one I think we'll both maybe address. So this organization is using both HTTP for on-prem, and they're also using HD Insight, and wants to know whether or not Attunity has the same capabilities to support HD Insight for some of their data science projects as they do within the HTTP, but they are using both environments.
So yes, we do. We support both. We see it. We're starting to see the emergence of hybrid deployments, multi-cloud deployments, and again having an architecture that supports the delivery of data where and when it's needed is something that's a core tenet of the Attunity platform. And yes, the same capabilities that I've described here are also supported in HDI.
Okay, and looks like we've got a couple more questions coming in here. What would you say are the main differentiators when comparing Attunity versus SAP data integration tools such as data services, HANA Cloud integration, HANA data integration, et cetera?
So there's a lot of different options from SAP for moving data within the SAP ecosystem, and they're all good. I'd say the core difference with Attunity is that we both feed data into HANA as well as extract data from HANA and ECC and make it available in other platforms. So the way in which we do that and the breadth of third-party options, we're an independent provider. We're not tied to any one environment. We're not incented by keeping data in the SAP platform or move it away from the SAP platform. We move it where and when it's needed. So the options that are available to customers who choose Attunity, you just have a lot more freedom and flexibility to move that SAP data and blend that SAP data with other data and move it to whichever target that you want.
Okay. And I do want to apologize to everyone. I know we've had some audio issues throughout the webinar, and I've been told that in the replay, in case you did miss something, the replay, we've been assured that will be okay. But there's a question here. When having multiple data sources, how would you apply decentralized standards so all streams utilize the same data standards?
So this is something that you can set up as you're setting up your replication tasks. There's ways that you can set up global consistency. So capturing the same style of information in a policy-oriented way is something that you can do. And I think that's what the question was getting at, unless I have it wrong.
Yeah, and then there's also some things within, I'll just have the other person. There's also some things within NiFi where there's some pre-built adapters that you can continue to use to apply the same type of standards in the frameworks to those the data streams. So you've got that within the adapter framework as well. So we didn't go much into detail about that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Cindy. You're absolutely right. So Attunity as a provider into NiFi, then you can take advantage of all the wonderful capabilities of NiFi to do just that. So you're right.
Got it. And I don't see any more questions. Just for everyone, there's a couple of assets or items. I mean, we went through some of the industry use cases, but there's also another kind of book that we talk about additional type of use cases across multiple industries using both NiFi and Tunity Replicate. And then also for a more technical perspective, there's also an ebook for NiFi for Dummies as well. So on that, Kate, I'm going to turn it back over to you to close us out here.
All right. Thank you, Cindy and Dan. You guys were fantastic. I want to thank you all for attending today and for sticking with us through all the audio problems. It was a bit of a nightmare, so you guys held out to the end, so thank you again so much. The on-demand version of this webinar will be sent out to you later today. It might be a couple of hours, but then no audio issues on the on-demand. All links will be still available on that on-demand version as well, so you can still come back and visit the links that Cindy just shared with you. And again, we want to thank you all again for attending, and I want to thank Cindy and Dan for speaking today. Have a good rest of the day, everyone. Thank you.